Hey guys, tonight we're stepping aboard a creaky, tar-slicked pirate sloop slicing through a restless sea under a bruised sky. The sails are straining like weary lungs, the ropes creak with every gust, and rain pelts the deck like musket shot. You're wrapped in a soggy wool coat that smells faintly of dried fish and something you'd rather not name. Lightning forks in the distance as the helmsman, missing 3 fingers and most of his teeth, grins at you. "First storm's always the worst," he rasps, comforting. You've joined a 17th-century pirate crew, and while gold doubloons and cutlasses might dominate the stories, tonight's focus is far more dental. Your mouth is dry from sea wind and salty air, and you're about to learn why the biggest threat on this voyage isn't cannon fire or shipwreck, it's your own gums. Because, surprise, in the golden age of piracy, your teeth didn't stand a chance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough to type, drop your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing where you're all listening from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the slick deck as the rain begins to fade, blending with sea spray and a faint smell of rum and rope tar. Your crewmates are spitting over the rails, some dramatically, others out of necessity, because for them, spitting means relief. Their gums are inflamed, some so swollen it hurts to chew even the soft bits of boiled salted pork. One man picks at his molars with a splinter of wood, wincing as blood bubbles up. You look away. Scurvy is already making quiet rounds. The disease, now mostly a trivia answer, was once a brutal force. Caused by a lack of vitamin C, it famously turned hardy sailors into aching, bruised, bleeding wrecks, and the mouth was its first playground. Your teeth, once reliably rooted, begin to feel loose. Your gums swell, redden, and ooze. It's the dental equivalent of a mutiny, and unfortunately, it's one you're unlikely to survive if it goes too far. Historians still argue whether pirates really suffered from scurvy as badly as naval sailors, since pirates could sometimes raid fresh provisions, unlike Navy crews locked into longer voyages. But, judging by the man next to you currently trying to tuck a piece of salted fish into his cheek like it's chewing tobacco because his teeth can't handle biting, it's safe to say they didn't escape unscathed. Salt plays its own role in this sea-bound drama. The ocean air and salty rations dry out your mouth constantly. You're dehydrated and there's no real clean water aboard. The barrels contained what was optimistically called fresh water, but it's been sitting for weeks and tastes like moldy wood and wet dog. Drinking too much rum makes your breath smell like the inside of a cannon and doesn't help your gums either. So, sailors spat, constantly. Spitting was like blinking, a reflex, an ongoing performance of discomfort. Between the chewing, the groaning, the bleeding, and the occasional howling during mealtimes, the ship began to feel like a floating dentist's waiting room, if the dentist was blindfolded, drunk, and using garden tools. One night, during a watch shift, you speak to a grizzled sailor named Tom Toothless. He claims to have started this voyage with a perfect smile. Now he gums his food like a baby bird and swears the secret to long life is chewing on rope ends. You try it. It tastes like horse sweat and sadness. Pirates weren't known for great hygiene, but that didn't mean they didn't care. The truth is, many of them simply lacked the means. Clean water, fresh citrus, and real medical care were luxuries. Out here, even brushing your teeth required creativity and a strong stomach. The ship creaks and groans like it knows what's coming next, a squall of mouth misery. You tuck your coat tighter, taste the salt on your lips, and realize that a toothache might be more dangerous than a storm. At least a storm passes. A toothache, that's a lifelong companion. And yet, amidst the mess, some pirates did try to preserve what teeth they had. Some chewed on mint or clove when they could steal it. Others rubbed ash or crushed charcoal on their teeth. Did it work? Debatable. Did it burn like the devil? Absolutely. You settle into your hammock, if it can be called that, a damp canvas sling swaying with the rhythm of the sea. Your jaw aches from clenching. A soft snore echoes nearby, followed by a loud yelp, another tooth down. But you're still here, and in the grand scheme of pirate miseries, maybe a little gum bleeding isn't so bad. After all, you've got both legs, one good eye, and a jawline that, while tender, is technically... You wake to the sound of someone gnawing. It's not an alarming gnaw, more of a determined, rhythmic crunch, like a rat trying to chew through a biscuit tin. You lift your head from your hammock and peek across the dim, swaying lower deck. It's just Jenkins, working his way through the morning ration. He's holding what looks like a large cracker in both hands and gnawing at one corner with the focus of a squirrel. Ah yes, the infamous hardtack. Your breakfast is already waiting for you in a small tin bowl. A hunk of salted pork, so dry it might be older than you, and a slab of hardtack that's done time as both food and furniture. The biscuit is rock solid, baked to withstand time and tide. And, as you quickly discover, it can do significant damage to your dental situation. You give it a cautious tap against the table. It echoes. A fellow crewmate chuckles and mutters, "That's not food, it's a weapon." He's not wrong. The pirate diet, for all its romanticized roasts and barrels of rum, was mostly a mash of whatever could survive long voyages without spoiling. That meant salted meats, dried beans, fermented cabbage, on a good day, dried peas, and those ever-faithful teeth chippers, hardtack biscuits. These things were so dry and hard, sailors often had to soak them in brine, beer, or even rum just to make them chewable. And that's assuming you didn't have to battle weevils first. Yes, weevils. Tiny beetles that made a home inside the biscuits. Most pirates didn't bother removing them. Protein's protein, and besides, it's the only thing in there that's actually fresh. You take a bite of yours, gently, and something crunchy shifts under your molars. You decide not to investigate further. Historians still debate how widespread nutritional deficiencies were among pirate crews, since some suggest they had more flexibility to raid fresh produce than Navy ships locked into long-term campaigns. But the daily fare on a pirate ship was still mostly edible only in theory. And it did no favors for your teeth. Salted beef was a staple. So salted, it sometimes had to be soaked for hours to become chewable. Even then, it remained more of a jaw workout than a meal. A pirate could get scurvy, cracked teeth, and lockjaw just from dinner. There's a story one old sailor shares as he carefully sucks on his breakfast. Once, a new recruit cracked a molar clean in half on his first bite of biscuit. The captain, in a rare moment of sympathy, gave the poor lad an extra ration of rum and told him to soak his hardtack next time. The recruit apparently chose to soak it in gunpowder and make a small bomb instead. A teaching moment, perhaps. You find yourself eyeing the salt pork with suspicion now. It's gray, shriveled, and smells faintly of something you last encountered in a basement. Pirates preserved meat in massive barrels of salt, often for months at a time. If you were lucky, it was just tough and dry. If you were unlucky, it was rancid. And if you were really unlucky, you got the last chunk at the bottom, swimming in brine and mystery. But you eat it anyway, because what else is there? A crewmate nearby offers a trick. Soak the meat in grog, he says. It softens and kills the smell. You do. It works. Somewhat. Now it tastes like salted despair with a rum chaser.
And still, through all of this, your teeth remain functional. Barely. But it's early days yet. To make it more exciting, because apparently chewing wasn't hard enough, pirates often had to eat quickly. Meals were short, served during brief breaks between labor or fighting. You didn't leisurely nibble your biscuit by moonlight. You crammed it in and hoped you didn't break a tooth before the next cannon fired. Some pirates found workarounds. There are murmurs that on Spanish ships, the cooks made a kind of garlic oil mash to soften biscuits. Others would use a pestle to pound their meals into something closer to slop. One clever cook reportedly turned hardtack into soup by boiling it with beer and mustard. Did it taste good? Unlikely. But was it chewable? That's the dream. Even when food wasn't the blame, the constant clenching of your jaw during storms, fights, or simply from cold could crack a tooth or strain your gums. There's no such thing as a soft life at sea, and that applies directly to your mouth. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve, which doesn't help much, and head back above deck. There, Jenkins is still gnawing on his biscuit. One corner now resembles a half-carved chess piece. He catches your eye and grins. Or tries to. He's missing a front tooth, and his gums are an angry red. "Worth it," he says. You don't ask. Instead, you lean on the railing, look out at the gray horizon, and wonder, how many molars will you still have if this voyage keeps going? And more importantly, do parrots have to deal with this?
The sun is finally out. That rare golden warmth spreads across the deck like melted butter on old wood, and the crew collectively exhales. Shirts come off, boots are kicked aside, and for a few blessed hours, the world doesn't feel like it's trying to kill you. But don't get too comfortable, because now it's time for the ship's favorite lie, the lime cure. You're crouched beside a barrel with a few crewmates, each holding a small, battered tin cup. The liquid inside is cloudy, with the smell of faint citrus and strong rum. Jenkins sniffs his, then takes a dramatic sip. "Tastes like sunshine and lies," he mutters. You drink. It's tart, sour, with an undertone of rot, but not unpleasant, especially compared to brine soup and biscuits that double as armor plating. This is the pirate attempt at staving off scurvy, the mythical power of citrus. There's a long-running myth that British sailors got the nickname limeys because of their regular ration of lime juice, introduced in the Royal Navy in the 1790s to combat scurvy. But it wasn't an overnight success. In fact, pirates had already figured out some citrus tricks long before the Admiralty started handing out lemons. Historians still argue whether pirates truly understood why citrus helped, or if they just liked the taste. There's little evidence that they connected vitamin C with gum health, but there are logs noting that ships returning from citrus-heavy regions, like the Caribbean or South America, had crews in better shape than others. And pirates, resourceful scavengers that they were, often looted those same regions. Citrus wasn't exactly common aboard every pirate ship, but when it was, it felt like magic. A single orange could lift morale like a victory against the Spanish. A lemon wedge in your grog meant one more week with all your teeth. It was like edible treasure. You lean back against a mast and listen as Old Crow, named unsurprisingly for his voice, tells a story. Supposedly, a French buccaneer once discovered a grove of wild lime trees on a tiny island near Hispaniola. He made lime syrup, mixed it with water and rum, and sold it as a miracle cure to fellow captains. Crow claims it saved a dozen crews from scurvy and made the man rich. Jenkins interrupts to point out that same captain died of toothache 2 months later. Miracle cure, my foot. Still, you wonder. The captain of your ship, a man known only as Briggs, is convinced citrus is the key to long life. Every week he orders his quartermaster to negotiate for limes when they stop ashore. If none are available, lemons will do. If neither are found, he settles for sour beer and a silent prayer. He even keeps a tiny jar of dried orange peel in his cabin, which he chews like tobacco when the weather's foul. Some pirates got creative. There are records of crews squeezing citrus into their grog, mixing it with honey, when they had it, or even soaking biscuit crumbs in lemon water to soften them. One English sailor supposedly invented pirate lemonade, just lemon, salt, and water, but the result was closer to punishment than refreshment. Of course, not every citrus remedy was helpful. Some crews believed boiling the peels and gargling the bitter water would cure sore gums. Others thought rubbing lemon directly on swollen gums would fix the issue. It burned. It always burned. But in a world without dentists, any pain that wasn't fatal was tolerable. There's one man on board named Dorian, lean, quiet, and always chewing something. You ask him what it is. Lemon peel, he says without looking up. Keeps the rot away. You're not sure whether he means teeth or thoughts, but you nod solemnly. By midday, the crew has shifted into repair mode. Sails need mending, ropes rebraided, and barrels checked for spoilage. You're tasked with organizing the galley. Inside, you find 3 limes rolling in the back of a crate like forgotten gold coins. You pocket one, more excited than you'd ever admit. You bite it later that evening, sitting alone on a crate near the stern. It's sharp, cold, and bursts with flavor that briefly cuts through the ever-present funk of salt and sweat. You savor the moment. Then your teeth throb anyway. Turns out, citrus helps, but it's not a cure-all, especially if you've already lost the dental war. You look up at the sky as it deepens into a bruised purple twilight. The ship sways gently. Someone is singing a low, meandering sea shanty nearby, probably about lost loves and moldy cheese. You let your shoulders relax. For now, your breath tastes vaguely of lime. Your teeth still sit, mostly where they should, and your next biscuit is hours away. Evening rolls in with the sort of breeze that makes you question whether it's refreshing or just a new way for the ocean to slap your face. You're scrubbing your tongue with a bit of charcoal. Yes, actual charcoal, because according to Jenkins, it scrapes off the stink. You're skeptical, but your options are limited. Toothpaste hasn't been invented yet. At least not in any recognizable form. But pirates? They were nothing if not creative and desperate. Which brings us to the next item in your oral hygiene adventure. Chewing sticks and sailor's sludge. You find one of these legendary chewing sticks wedged behind a barrel, and someone swears it's imported from Africa. It's probably just driftwood, but hey, when in Rome, or rather when in a wooden death trap drifting across the Atlantic. You chew it experimentally. It splinters quickly, softens into a sort of brush at the end, and doesn't taste entirely like mildew. Could be worse. These natural brushes were more common than you'd think. Throughout history and across cultures, from the Middle East's miswak to South Asia's neem twigs, chewing sticks served as a toothbrush substitute. Pirates, exposed to a mashup of global traditions via plunder and port calls, often picked up these habits. Some favored sticks from aromatic trees like bay or cinnamon bark for the added flavor. Others just grabbed whatever didn't make them gag. Historians still argue whether chewing sticks actually cleaned teeth or just redistributed the grime, but it's clear many seafarers believed in them. Some journals even mention bartering for specific twigs at port. Consider that the 17th century equivalent of a toothbrush endorsement deal. You're hunched beside the cook fire now, watching a pot of something vaguely brown bubble away. The ship's cook, Big Silas, whose hygiene is generously experimental, is stirring with what looks like a bone. You make the mistake of asking, "What's for dinner?" He says, "Teeth stew," without looking up. You hope he's joking. Across the deck, a wiry sailor is mixing a black paste in a scallop shell. You ask what that is. He calls it sailor's sludge, a homemade concoction of salt, charcoal, and the ashes of burnt bread. You gag a little just hearing about it. He explains, you dab it on, scrub with your finger or a bit of cloth. Rinse with rum. You try it, hesitantly. The paste is gritty, bitter, and tastes like regret. But your teeth feel not worse, so that's something. Cloth scrubbing was another pirate favorite, especially with sailcloth scraps. You wrap a strip around your finger, dip it in the sludge, and rub along your teeth. It's not pleasant, but after weeks of hardtack, salted meat, and dried fish, it does feel like sandpapering away the memory of lunch. The ship rocks gently as the sun dips below the horizon. You rinse with grog, because what else do you have? The alcohol stings a little, but it also leaves your mouth feeling cleaner than salt water ever could. And yes, rinsing with alcohol was common. Not ideal, maybe, but it killed some bacteria and dulled the pain. Pirates who had access to strong spirits, brandy, rum, or fermented sugarcane mash, often used a swig to clean their mouths. Whether it worked or just numbed the nerves is still up for debate. Jenkins tells you about a sailor he knew who made toothpaste from crushed seashells and vinegar. "Whitest teeth I've ever seen," he says, but his breath could kill a shark. You believe him. As darkness sets in, the deck quiets. Some men sing softly, others sleep where they fell. You sit beside a coil of rope and slowly chew on another stick, watching the stars come out. Somewhere, a rat scurries between barrels, probably has cleaner teeth than half the crew. And here's the thing. Pirates didn't not care about their teeth. They just lacked the luxury of modern solutions. In their world, dental pain wasn't just annoying. It could be fatal. An infected tooth could swell, rot, and kill you in weeks. So chewing sticks, burnt bread paste, and grog rinses were more than superstition. They were survival. You spit a splinter from your tongue and lean back against the mast. Your gums ache slightly, your breath is somewhere between limey and smoky, and your fingers are blackened with charcoal. Still, for a fleeting moment, your mouth feels clean, or clean-ish. And that, on a pirate ship, is as good as it gets.
Dawn creeps across the sea like a lazy cat stretching on a windowsill. Pink bleeds into blue, the waves glitter, and the gulls begin their usual screaming. You rise from your damp patch of sailcloth, feeling like your jaw's been replaced with a handful of gravel. Gums swollen, tooth throbbing, one eye twitching. You may be getting what the crew calls jaw fever. Not a real fever, not in the strict medical sense, but definitely something no one wants to write songs about. You shuffle toward the quartermaster, who's just finished scratching an inventory list onto a plank with a nail. He looks up, sees your face, and sighs. Which brings us to the next wonder of pirate dentistry: tools of terror and amateur surgery. Let's get one thing straight. You did not want to reach the stage where someone needed to poke around your mouth with anything sharper than a spoon. But eventually, every pirate, no matter how citrus savvy or charcoal diligent, faced the grim specter of the tooth pull. Historians still argue whether ship surgeons or barber surgeons, depending on the crew's budget and luck, were better than no help at all. Some were trained in cities like London or Marseille. Others were just good with knives and had steady hands. A few were literal barbers who got promoted after too many close shaves. The tools? Oh, you'll love them. First, the dental key. Shaped a bit like a door key, this infernal contraption hooked around a tooth and twisted until the offending molder popped free or shattered into several unhelpful bits. Sound fun? Most patients disagreed.
The design was improved over time, which is to say it became more efficient at removing teeth and, occasionally, bits of jaw. Then there were the forceps. Think tongs, but angrier. Designed to grip and yank, they relied heavily on brute strength and luck. Sometimes, a particularly stubborn tooth took several sailors holding the patient down while the surgeon worked like a man possessed. If you passed out, great. If not, well, screaming was encouraged. You're sitting on a barrel now, watching as the quartermaster rummages through a sack of medical supplies, mostly bandages, a rust-flecked hook, and a bottle of something that smells like vinegar and doom. He mutters, "Could cauterize it," then thinks better of it. You volunteer to wait a bit longer. Still, some pirates swore by home surgery. One account mentions a crew that tied a rotten tooth to a pistol trigger with string. The patient stood still, another man fired, and voila, instant extraction. Unclear what happened to the surrounding facial structure. Another favored method was the slam technique. You'd place the sharp end of a spoon, or a chisel, against the tooth and give it a good whack with the butt of a cutlass. This, of course, came with the caveat, don't sneeze mid-swing. Some captains employed a ship's carpenter for the job. He's good with wood, they'd say. Teeth aren't that different. You can't help but wonder what happened to those captains. Despite all this chaos, a few primitive painkillers did exist. Opium, when available, helped dull the agony. Alcohol, usually rum or whatever passed for it, was the standard. Pirates would swig until unconsciousness felt like mercy. Others chewed on clothes, which contain eugenol, a natural anesthetic. You try one later. Burns like fire, numbs like frost, tastes like a regretful Christmas. Of course, not all interventions were medieval madness. Some crews practiced mouth rinses with warm seawater, salt and vinegar, or even brandy infused with herbs. One journal describes a tincture made from mint, rosemary, and black pepper. The author claims it cured his toothache, his seasickness, and temporarily his marriage. You're skeptical on all counts. Your own jaw is getting worse. You find Dorian, the lemon peel guy, who wordlessly hands you a tiny pouch of crushed cloves and charcoal. You pack it against your gums, wincing. Oddly, the pain ebbs. You sit by the mainmast and listen as Jenkins regales a younger sailor with the tale of one-tooth Manny. Manny, according to legend, pulled all his own teeth out in one feverish night during a storm off Madagascar. He claimed he never felt better. No one ever saw him again. The day wears on, and you drift into a half-doze, jaw still aching but manageable. Someone starts a game of dice near your feet. Someone else sings off-key about a mermaid with dental issues. In the end, the tools of pirate dentistry were brutal, improvised, and terrifying, but they were sometimes the only thing between you and a fatal infection. As Briggs once said while rinsing his mouth with spiced rum, better to scream once than rot slowly. You're not sure he's right, but you are sure of one thing. You're going to keep chewing that lemon peel and whispering sweet nothings to your last molar. It's all about survival, after all. By now, your breath could scare barnacles off a hull, but hey, at least you still have most of your teeth. As the midday sun scorches the deck, you squint into the horizon, wondering whether anything about pirate life wasn't designed to slowly kill you, and then it hits you. There's something you've yet to experience, the fabled limes and lemons, pirate dental legend. Your gums still tingle from the clove charcoal poultice, but someone hands you a chunk of dried lime and winks. "Nature's toothbrush," he says. You gnaw it cautiously. It's bitter, chewy, and somehow both too soft and too sharp. But it does make your mouth water, and for once, you feel vaguely refreshed. Here's the thing. Scurvy, the sailor's slow-motion nightmare, wasn't just about vitamin C. It was also the leading cause of spontaneous tooth loss among pirates. Gums turned spongy, teeth loosened and fell out, and old wounds reopened. You'd slowly unravel, one connective tissue at a time. Historians still argue whether pirates fully understood why citrus helped. Some captains definitely didn't. Others, especially those who'd sailed with or near the British Navy, had picked up the trick. Citrus, especially lemons and limes, kept the worst of scurvy at bay. Not cured it exactly, but blunted its teeth, so to speak. You recall that the British eventually earned the nickname limeys for this reason. Pirates weren't exactly health nuts, but they watched what worked. If a rival crew came back healthier and with more teeth, well, maybe the secret lay in that weird fruit they were chewing during shore leave. So, enterprising captains, those rare ones who thought a healthy crew was a useful one, began rationing citrus. Lemons in brine, lime juice diluted with rum, not a punishment, or whole preserved slices pickled in vinegar. One particularly hygienic crew in 1683 reportedly drank lime water every morning before the rum. No one liked them. Back on deck, someone uncorks a small barrel and scoops out a pulpy mess, fermented lime rind steeped in brine and something that might have once been honey. It smells foul. You try it anyway. The taste hits you like a wet slap, but your mouth feels instantly awake. Sorta clean. Definitely alert. Jenkins tells you this mixture is sometimes called yellow sailor's paste. It doubles as a mouth rinse and, get this, a cure for foot rot. You silently vow not to ask too many follow-up questions. Pirates learned about citrus not just from each other, but from many cultures they collided with. In the Caribbean, local populations had long used tropical fruits in food and medicine. In West Africa, sailors learned of sour fruit teas brewed to settle the stomach and strengthen the teeth. Some old sea dogs would boil lemon peel with herbs and gargle the result, swearing it cleared mouth ghosts. We're still working on the science behind that one. Still, fruit wasn't always available. Storms, poor planning, and general pirate chaos meant rations ran out, so they got creative. Some turned to tamarind pods, others to dried rose hips. One desperate crew reportedly boiled pine needles in seawater, though whether that helped or just made their mouth taste like furniture polish is up for debate. You sit cross-legged beside the helm, slowly sucking the last of your lime wedge. Around you, men wipe sticky juice on their sleeves, grit their teeth against the sourness, and somehow seem to smile more afterward. It's no miracle cure, but citrus made the difference between functioning and falling apart, between pulling teeth and keeping them. As the afternoon heat begins to soften, a small fight breaks out over the last lemon slice. It ends with a handshake and a shared rind. You chew what's left and wonder, not for the first time, if pirates weren't just sailors with better snacks. A few crewmen gather by the rail, comparing mouth pain levels like old war stories. One guy insists lime juice mixed with salt water cured his cousin's molar. Another swears by lemon zest mixed with ash. You nod, pretending you haven't just learned what a molar is this week. Then, in a hushed tone, someone mentions the citrus code, an unspoken agreement among pirates to share lemon rations in times of crisis. Might be myth, might be something someone made up to justify stealing Jenkins's pickled limes. Either way, it sounds noble. And mildly sticky. As night drapes over the ship again, you curl up beneath the sailcloth. Your teeth still ache, but your mouth tastes vaguely of lemons and defiance. You fall asleep wondering whether your modern toothpaste could beat this weird pirate system. Honestly, you're not sure. When you wake up, your jaw has eased slightly, though one particularly grumpy molar still feels like it's plotting against you. The sky is overcast and a soft drizzle mists the deck, refreshing if you pretend it's a spa. Today, you're tasked with helping the cook, which sounds like a punishment until you realize pirate cuisine had its own role in dental hygiene, or lack thereof. You followed the scent of something vaguely meaty and vaguely burnt to the galley, a cramped, smoky nook where miracles and disasters are born in equal measure. On the menu this morning, hardtack and something the cook calls sea stew. You eye the offerings suspiciously, already bracing for the tooth-cracking finale. Hardtack, the stuff of sailor legend. Imagine a cracker baked until all moisture and joy has been removed, then left to sit in a barrel for months until it reaches the approximate hardness of limestone. Pirates softened it in water, beer, or stew. You tap it against the bench and are almost sure it chips the wood. Chewing hardtack without breaking a tooth was a skill. Some sailors used their knives to shave it into edible shards. Others soaked it until soggy. There's a joke among the crew. Lose your teeth to scurvy? lose the rest to hardtack. Historians still argue whether hardtack was ever meant to be eaten dry. Some say it was merely a vehicle, something to push stew around the bowl. Others claim pirates intentionally toughened it to test the loyalty of new recruits. Probably not. But food wasn't all bad. Pirate stews, though unpredictable, often contained garlic, onions, or peppers, ingredients with surprising antibacterial properties. A fiery pepper stew might sear your tongue, but it could also kill bacteria living rent-free in your gums. One fringe diary from a Spanish privateer even suggests that some crews brewed clove soup during long voyages. It wasn't tasty, but it left the mouth numb and oddly fresh. You make a note to ask Jenkins about this. He seems like the clove soup type. Some pirates swore by chewing licorice root or fennel seeds after meals, not because they knew anything about oral hygiene per se, but because it masked the breath of salt tongue, that special brand of halitosis cultivated by months of salted fish and no dental floss. The cook offers you a strange green bundle wrapped in palm leaf. Bite gently, he says with the gravity of a man who's watched teeth fly. Inside is a mix of mashed plantains and shredded coconut. Sweet, mushy, and, miracle of miracles, easy on the gums. You almost weep. In warmer waters, when pirates raided Caribbean or South American ports, they often stocked up on fresh food, tropical fruits, root vegetables, and even sugarcane. Chewing sugarcane, despite what modern dentists might say, was surprisingly popular. It gave you energy and cleaned the teeth. Kind of, until it didn't. You watch as a young sailor gnaws on a thick stalk of cane, then promptly pulls out a loose tooth. He pockets it without a word, probably for luck. You decide to hold off on the cane. Later, one of the older deckhands passes you a jar of black paste. It smells like molasses and ash. Brush with it once a week, he says. Keeps your mouth too confused to rot. You try a dab on your finger, gritty, sweet, strangely cleansing. The cook confirms it's made from burnt bread, salt, and rum-soaked cloves, a family recipe. You ask if it works. He grins a nearly toothless grin. Did for me, he says. There's a strange comfort in these half-methods. They're improvised, yes, and occasionally questionable, but they come from centuries of desperate, creative survival. You find yourself respecting the trial-and-error logic behind it all. You don't need a modern degree to know that moldy meat is bad and lemon juice helps your breath. One night, the crew sits around swapping food stories. Someone recalls a Jamaican cook who added mint leaves to every dish. Cleared my sinuses and my guilt, he jokes. Another mentions a Polynesian sailor who chewed guava bark after meals. Turns out, modern science backs that one up. It's antimicrobial. Not that they knew it, they just like the taste. As you help clean the pots, your fingers slick with fish oil and palm fat. You notice how your tongue keeps returning to your teeth, checking for pain. There's less now. Maybe it's the black paste. Maybe it's the mushed coconut. Or maybe you're just adapting. You fall asleep that night with the taste of smoked banana on your tongue, the lull of ship creaks in your ears, and the faint hope that food, at least, is trying to keep you alive.
The next morning, someone's shouting about an abscess. You sit up, bleary-eyed, to find a small cluster of crewmates gathered near the mast, eyes wide with fascination and mild horror. A young sailor is clutching his cheek, which is swollen to the size of a coconut. His breathing shallow, and his eyes, yep, those are tears. And so, today's theme finds you rather forcefully. What pirates did when dental care failed completely. Let's not sugarcoat it. Dental disasters on pirate ships were frequent, and they got ugly fast. Without access to real surgeons or anesthesia, even the hardiest pirate had reason to fear an infected tooth. You get closer to the group, trying to look helpful, but not too involved. The last thing you want is to be handed a pair of rusty pliers. Historians still argue whether pirates typically had designated tooth pullers, or if that was just something drawn from naval fiction. What is known is this: when a tooth became unbearable, swollen, pus-filled, radiating pain into the skull, there were only a few options, and none of them were relaxing. The most common solution was extraction, performed by the quartermaster, carpenter,
or whoever had the strongest grip and the steadiest hand that day. No medical training required, just bravery, a cloth to bite on, and a decent pair of forceps, which might also be used for nail removal, or, in some cases, blacksmithing. The unlucky sailor sits on a barrel. A handkerchief is tied around his head like a cartoon ghost. Jenkins appears, holding what looks like tongs. You quickly back away. You'd heard of pirates numbing pain with rum, cloves, even ice if they were near glacier waters. But most often they just bit down, screamed into the ocean air, and hoped someone would hold their shoulders. There's no Novocaine at sea, just salt air and questionable tools. Some crews, particularly in the Indian Ocean, had access to traditional healers, men and women who used poultices made of crushed herbs and roots. One diary tells of a Malagasy healer who treated a pirate's swollen gum by applying warm banana leaves soaked in ginger root paste. Miraculously, it worked. Or, so the story goes. The sailor kept the tooth and married the healer's daughter. Hollywood would be proud. But more often, desperation trumped romance. You've heard tales, grim ones, of pirates drilling tiny holes into infected gums to relieve pressure. Others swore by rinsing with urine. And yes, that's exactly as appetizing as it sounds. It wasn't about taste, it was about survival. Later that day, you find yourself in the lower hold, where an old sailor sits beside a wooden box labeled surgeon's bits. Inside are tools that look like instruments of torture, a tooth key which resembles a crank, an iron spoon-like scraper, and something that might have been a saw in another life. He grins when you recoil. "Had this one pulled during a storm," he says, pointing to the gap in his mouth. "Didn't even stop eating." You admire the bravado, but also note that he's currently gumming his fish. Curiously, there are accounts, very French, very likely embellished, of pirates using hot coals to cauterize bad gums. One story tells of a captain in 1702 who pressed a branding iron to the side of his jaw after a botched tooth pull. Did it work? Hard to say, but nobody ever questioned his leadership again. Not all stories are gruesome. Some pirates practice preventative care, at least by their standards, chewing certain roots, swishing seawater, even massaging the gums with a rag soaked in salt and vinegar. Was it effective? Debatable, but it might have made them feel in control. You also learn that pirate lore includes tooth omens. A loose molar before a raid? Bad luck. A sudden toothache during calm seas? A storm is coming. One superstitious quartermaster in 1697 reportedly carried a pouch of baby teeth from past crewmates. No one asked questions. There's also a darker tradition. When pirates died, especially those with distinctive dental features, gold fillings, silver caps, or even just unusual gaps, some crews would remove the teeth as keepsakes, not for malice, but for memory. And in rare cases, currency. A molar with a gold inlay might fetch a small fortune in the right port. You now understand why Jenkins never sleeps with his mouth open. As night falls, the sailor with the abscess sleeps beside a small fire, cheek wrapped in warm cloth, sipping clove tea with a splash of rum. His eyes are glassy, but he's breathing easier. Whether the swelling breaks or the tooth comes out tomorrow, you're not sure. But for tonight, there's peace. You curl up in your hammock, oddly grateful for your molars, even the cranky one. You dream of banana leaves, coconut mash, and a world where dentists take insurance.
The sound of gulls wakes you. Or maybe it's Jenkins loudly singing about sea biscuits again. Either way, your jaw feels neutral, a small victory. You stretch your limbs, grateful for another day without dental doom, and wander topside, where the crew is already bustling about, coiling ropes, scanning horizons, and arguing over the location of a phantom island that almost certainly doesn't exist. Today's lesson sneaks up on you slowly. How pirates borrowed dental wisdom from the many cultures they encountered. See, pirates weren't known for their restraint or diplomacy, but they were brilliant scavengers, not just of gold and rum, but of knowledge. They absorbed tricks, tips and remedies from wherever the tide took them. It was necessity, mostly. When your gums swell like sourdough, you'll try just about anything. Historians still argue whether this cultural borrowing was intentional curiosity or simple desperation. Either way, the record shows pirates picked up surprising dental practices from Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Americas. Jenkins is chatting with a sailor named Omar, who's from the Barbary Coast. You lean in, feigning casual interest. Omar's talking about miswak, a twig from the Salvadora persica tree, used like a toothbrush for centuries. He's got one tucked behind his ear like a pencil. Cleans the mouth, freshens the breath, and keeps demons out, he says, handing it to Jenkins, who immediately starts chewing it like jerky. You get one too. Less for hygiene, more for the sheer novelty. The twig tastes earthy and slightly spicy, and after a few minutes of gnawing, your mouth does feel cleaner. Not minty fresh exactly, but less piratey. In West Africa, pirates learned from the Yoruba and other coastal communities, many of whom used charcoal to scrub their teeth. Not the gritty black toothpaste from the galley, but finely ground ash mixed with oil or bark extract. It polished teeth surprisingly well, and gave pirate smiles a certain matte finish, like rustic porcelain if porcelain had been dragged behind a horse. You're told about Polynesian navigators who chewed hibiscus stems for oral hygiene. They also used coral powder to polish their teeth, an idea that makes you wince, but was oddly effective. Strong jaws, those islanders, Jenkins mutters, massaging his molars. Later in the day, a Brazilian crewmate shows you how to mash guava leaves and roll them between the gums to soothe inflammation. Heals fast, he promises, popping a glob into his cheek like tobacco. Turns out, modern dentists now say guava's antibacterial properties are real. Pirates just like the way it stopped bleeding. There are whispers about Chinese merchants who traded with pirates off the coast of Malacca. They reportedly brought small packets of powdered herbs, including mint, star anise, and dried orange peel. Pirates loved them, not just for the taste, but for their tooth-soothing properties. And, naturally, because anything vaguely sweet was a hit among men raised on brine and beef jerky. Even among European pirates, there was variation. Mediterranean sailors sometimes carried oil-infused cloths to wipe their teeth after meals. Portuguese pirates were known to boil bay leaves and cloves together for a rinse. One pirate even claimed to use wine-soaked mint as a mouthwash. Expensive, but dignified, he said. You watch Jenkins attempt this with cooking wine and someone's crushed garden mint. He coughs for 10 minutes, but insists it's refreshing. Not all borrowed practices were winners. A group of Dutch pirates once tried using sulfur powder as a tooth whitener, based on a garbled folk remedy. It made their teeth smell like rotten eggs. Another attempt to brush with gunpowder ended when someone's molars turned black. You can guess how that story ends. But the pattern holds. Pirates paid attention. They might raid a port, steal some spices, and walk away with a local dental remedy they'd never heard of. Over time, these snippets formed a patchwork system of oral survival. Messy, improvised, but strangely global. You imagine a chart somewhere in an alternate universe. Pirate dental techniques by region. The Caribbean section would include sugarcane floss and coconut oil rinses. East Africa, miswak and myrrh sap. Southeast Asia, clove rinses and turmeric paste. Europe, despair and hardtack. A scholarly note once remarked that pirate hygiene, though primitive, reflected the diversity of the crew. You see it every day. A Turkish clove chewer chats with a Jamaican lime rinser. A Frenchman swears by rinsing with vinegar, while an Irish pirate insists on just chewing moss. You sit back, watching this odd orchestra of dental habits playing out across the deck. There's a strange unity in it all. These men, hardened and half-mad, swapping tips like neighbors at a garden party. One pirate offers you a pinch of dried peppermint from his pouch. Got it off a monk in Malta. You try it. Tingly. Uplifting. You briefly wonder if monks had better teeth than pirates. Almost certainly. As the sun sets, the deck smells faintly of cloves, mint, and the usual hint of wet rope. You chew your miswak twig slowly, imagining the centuries of sailors who did the same. There's something oddly noble about it. Something clean. Your jaw is calm, your gums soothed, and for once, your breath might not frighten passing birds. The next day dawns with a strange calm. The sea is glassy, the air thick and still. One of those eerie, windless mornings where even the sails look sleepy. The crew's taking it slow, sharpening knives half-heartedly, patching clothes with twine, and, inevitably, talking about the old days. You find yourself perched near the cook fire, listening as Jenkins and a few grizzled veterans swap stories about pirate captains past. And soon, tonight's thread reveals itself. The toothy legacy of famous pirate leaders and their unexpected dental habits. Blackbeard, Jenkins begins, had the breath of a tomb. He says it like it's folklore, which, let's be honest, it mostly is. Historians still argue whether Blackbeard was as terrifying as the stories claim, or simply a master of theater. The truth's probably somewhere in between, but there are first-hand accounts describing his wild eyes, his smoky beard lit with slow-burning fuses, and yes, his rotten teeth. Too much rum, says a sailor. Too many dried plums, adds another. You're not sure either's accurate, but the image is vivid. A fearsome captain with a mouthful of blackened molars, barking orders through the stench of decay. Pirates respected strength, but they didn't necessarily admire hygiene. Still, not all leaders let their mouths go to ruin. Captain Anne Bonny, for example, reportedly chewed clothes regularly. Whether for breath or as a mild antiseptic, no one's sure. But one journal entry from a captured merchant mentions a red-haired woman with a sharp tongue and no missing teeth. High praise, considering the era. Then there's Qing Si, the formidable Chinese pirate queen who commanded over 300 ships in the early 1800s. Though slightly outside your current 17th century bubble, her influence floated in pirate lore. Some said she used powdered ginger to clean her teeth. Others claimed she boiled betel leaves for rinses. Pirates loved to exaggerate, of course, but even fictionalized respect carries meaning. Henry Morgan, yes, the rum guy, was notorious for feasting and drinking to excess. Yet, oddly enough, his dental remains, discovered in a Panama grave centuries later, showed relatively intact molars. Some scholars speculate he had access to better care via his semi-legitimate ties to the British Crown. Or maybe he just chewed sugarcane slowly. You learn that Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, was fanatical about grooming. He wore elegant clothes, kept a tidy beard, and may have brushed with linen cloth soaked in spiced water. He banned gambling on board and insisted on some version of order. His crew's dental records aren't preserved, obviously, but he strikes you as the sort to carry a peppermint sprig in his vest. One pirate even had dental gold. Olivier Lavassière, Jenkins whispers, had a tooth capped in silver, or gold, or diamond. Depends who you ask. The real story probably just a bit of dental repair courtesy of a French port. But to the crew, it was like a treasure map written in enamel. Sometimes teeth played roles beyond chewing. Pirate leaders were known to use their grins as weapons. A particularly gappy smile could disarm a prisoner faster than a pistol. One infamous pirate, Pegtooth Pete, leaned into it, filing his teeth slightly and painting them with ash. The result? Instant intimidation, especially in a dark alley or dim hold. You can't help but wonder, was dental maintenance a leadership strategy? Maybe keeping a full set of molars meant you could still shout above a storm. Maybe breath that didn't melt wood helped in negotiations. Of course, the most legendary stories are the least verifiable. A journal from 1699 describes a captain who had all his teeth removed voluntarily, claiming they distracted him from the sea. He wore a carved ivory denture made by a fellow crewmate, shaped vaguely like a shark's smile. They called him Captain Gums. I suspect this story, while delightful, is also complete nonsense. Still, you'd pay to see that denture. As dusk rolls in, Jenkins pulls out a tiny silver case from his satchel. Inside, a single tooth, Captain Iron, worn smooth. Captain Rourke, he says, voice unusually quiet. Swallowed his own earring during a raid. This came out 6 days later. You don't ask how Jenkins came into possession of it, but you nod solemnly. You realize something simple. Pirate captains weren't just leaders, they were brands. Every tooth lost or saved added to their mythos. They weren't aiming for perfection, they aimed for memorable. Gaps became trademarks. Gold fillings turned into signals of success. Even decay, if dramatic enough, could be a flex. As the stars bloom over the rigging, someone nearby chuckles and mutters, "Teeth or no teeth, the captain still got bite." You smile, your own teeth mostly intact, and feel oddly inspired. In a world with no dentists, dental charisma still mattered. The sea wakes slowly the next morning, with soft swells and the kind of mist that makes every sound feel a little more muffled, a little more distant. Somewhere behind the fog, gulls scream like they're arguing over breakfast. You yawn, stretch, and wander the deck, still marveling at how your teeth haven't rebelled against you yet. This leg of the journey drifts into something less personal, but no less fascinating. How ship doctors, if you were lucky enough to have one, handled dental care. Now, calling them doctors is generous. Most were barber surgeons, carpenters who'd learned just enough anatomy to amputate limbs without fainting. But in the 17th century, that counted as elite. The best of them carried small wooden kits lined with grim little tools, iron hooks, forceps, and wicked-looking scrapers, all clinking like cutlery in a drawer you'd rather never open. The standard dental toolkit of the era usually included a tooth key. Picture a medieval corkscrew designed to yank molars. The tooth key's curved claw would lock around the base of the tooth and then twist. A loud snap, a bit of blood, a scream or three, and if you were lucky, the entire tooth came out in one piece. Surgeons sometimes attempted fillings. With what, you ask? Beeswax? Lead? Occasionally chewed bark resin. These makeshift plugs rarely lasted, but they did buy time. Historians still debate whether some of these early fillings were learned from indigenous healers or just trial and error born of desperation. You wander below deck to where the surgeon keeps his tools, stored in a chest that smells faintly of rum and regret. He's not a cruel man, just practical. He's used to doing more with less. Got a molar bothering you? He asks, cracking his knuckles. You shake your head quickly. Still, he talks you through the process, because if the pain gets too bad, you'll beg him for help, eventually. He explains how cloves were sometimes ground into a paste to numb the gums before extraction. Sometimes we soak a rag in rum and bite down hard, he says. The clove helps, but mostly it's the rum. Another trick, heated spoons. If a cavity hurt too much and the tooth couldn't be pulled, a red-hot spoon could cauterize the nerve. He says, kills the pain and the tooth. You blanch. He grins. He's got 5 visible teeth. 2 are real. Sometimes you were too seasick to even notice dental pain. Surgeons would rinse sailors' mouths with salt water and vinegar, not because it was pleasant, but because it was clean. Cleanish. Some swore by it. Herbal poultices were common too. Sea moss mixed with crushed garlic, pressed against an abscess. Ginger soaked in brine. Sometimes they even used bits of squid ink as an antiseptic smear. You suspect this one was invented during extreme boredom, but apparently it wasn't entirely ineffective. Historians still argue whether these shipboard remedies were passed down through generations or cobbled together from desperation. Likely both. Pirate medicine was never standardized. It was whatever you could make work with rope, fire, and panic. What about dentures, you wonder? They existed, if you were rich. Carved from ivory, wood, or even animal bone. They were rare at sea, too fragile, too expensive. Most pirates didn't bother. A soft diet of mush and rum took care of things. Gums toughened, people adapted. One enterprising surgeon reportedly fashioned a partial denture from turtle shell and copper wire. It worked well enough until the copper corroded and turned the sailor's gums green. He became something of a legend, a moss-mouthed ghost with a crooked smile. You hear about another pirate who lost 4 front teeth in a brawl and fashioned replacements from bits of whalebone tied to twine. Every time he sneezed, the teeth shifted. He'd reset them with a finger, like adjusting spectacles. Later, the surgeon shows you a jar filled with extracted teeth, trophies or cautionary tales, depending on the mood. They rattle like dice. Some are blackened, some are oddly smooth. A few are cracked in half, like broken porcelain. One has a tiny emerald lodged in the root. You don't ask. He tells you that on very rare occasions, pirates pooled funds for a real dentist, usually in port towns like Port Royal or Havana. But the results varied wildly. One French-trained dentist insisted on bloodletting before extractions. He claims balances the humors, also makes you too dizzy to scream. As you leave the makeshift infirmary, a crewmate stumbles in, holding his jaw and muttering about a demon molar. You don't wait to see the procedure. Some things are better left in foggy memory. Back on deck, you take comfort in the now familiar rituals. Your miswak twig, your salt rinse, a bit of dried mint. You've learned enough to know that prevention beats pirate dentistry every time. And still, through all the crude tools and questionable science, you see something oddly admirable. These men tried. With nothing but splinters and superstition, they worked to keep each other alive and chewing.
By now, you've been at sea long enough that days start to blend. The rhythm of waves, the creak of the masts, the salty air drying everything, even your thoughts, into something slower, simpler. But this morning, as you chew thoughtfully on a bit of sea biscuit, carefully softened in water so it doesn't betray your teeth, your mind drifts somewhere new. How pirates adapted their diets to protect their teeth, whether intentionally or by accident. Let's be clear, pirates didn't exactly follow a dentist-approved meal plan. You're not going to find kale smoothies or calcium supplements in the galley. But over time, certain foods, habits, and unspoken rules evolved, not necessarily out of health awareness, but pure survival. Take hardtack, for instance. These dry, tooth-breaking biscuits were a staple on ships. Made of flour, water, and nothing else, they were baked until practically immortal. On their own, they were miserable, unless you fancied biting into something with the density of a roofing tile. But pirates learned to soak them in broth or rum, or crumble them into stews, softening the blow. Historians still argue whether the constant gnawing strengthened jaws or simply wore down enamel faster. Probably both. Then there were citrus fruits, lemons and limes when available. British sailors were nicknamed limeys for a reason. By the late 1600s, naval doctors started noticing that citrus prevented scurvy, a disease that could make your gums swell, bleed, and eventually rot away. While pirates weren't known for strict regimens, they weren't stupid. Word got around. A good captain made sure to trade for citrus when docked. If not for health, then for morale. A splash of lime in your grog? It might just save your smile. Some crews even developed superstitions around food. You hear tell of one ship that banned apples, claiming they caused tooth spirits. Another swore that chewing roasted barley before bed prevented mouth demons. These beliefs sound ridiculous now, but scratch beneath the surface and you'll find practical logic. Roasted barley might have provided trace minerals,
Chewing anything at night helped clear food debris. And avoiding apples? Probably a misunderstanding of sour varieties causing tooth sensitivity. Occasionally, pirates stumbled upon nutritious gold mines. On islands in the Caribbean or West Africa, they'd trade with local communities for tropical fruits, salted fish, or leafy greens. One journal from 1685 describes a crew feasting on papaya and plantains after a long sail. "The sweetness revived our teeth," the entry reads. Maybe it's poetic license. Maybe it's biology, vitamin C, fiber, hydration. Dried fruits were another mixed blessing. Prunes, figs, raisins, all calorie-dense, portable, and often traded at ports. But sticky sugars clung to teeth, promoting decay. Pirates didn't know about plaque, but they knew a sweet tooth could turn sour. Some crews rinsed their mouths with diluted vinegar after eating. Not exactly delicious, but surprisingly effective. One culinary quirk that makes you pause: pirates sometimes chewed leather. Not out of preference, it was usually desperation or boredom. Old boots, scraps of belt, anything they could soften with spit and salt. The friction helped clean the teeth, in a way. Unpleasant? Absolutely. But there's something almost meditative about chewing for chewing's sake. Rum, of course, was the wild card. It was everywhere, used for pain relief, celebration, even currency. But pirates weren't constantly drunk, despite the rumors. Grog, a diluted mix of rum and water, sometimes with lime or sugar, was the standard drink. Full-strength rum would ruin both your liver and your crew. Still, frequent drinking wore down teeth. Alcohol dries the mouth, reducing protective saliva. Combined with sugar, a slow recipe for rot. You also hear about a few pirates who chewed herbs between meals, not just for breath, but for mouth health. Clove, mint, and even fennel seeds made the rounds. Were they effective? Well, modern science says yes. These plants have mild antibacterial properties, but back then it was more about comfort and ritual. Some ships had unspoken rules about mealtimes too. Chew slow, one cook growls. Fast teeth break fast. Eating too quickly meant cracking molars on bone or biting down on a hidden pebble in the stew. Everyone knew someone who chipped a tooth on something unforgiving. Better to savor your salt pork. You get into the habit of chewing with care, rinsing with seawater afterwards, and using your miswak twig to work out the leftovers. It's a little nightly ritual now. Strangely calming, almost sacred. In a world where teeth can determine whether you eat, speak, or smile, protecting them starts to feel like protecting your humanity. Sometimes crewmates swap stories of weird foods said to regrow teeth. Turtle eggs soaked in molasses, crushed coral dissolved in vinegar. Eat enough squid ink and your gums turn to iron, one sailor insists. He's missing 3 front teeth, but speaks with confidence. You smile and let him have it. Historians still argue whether pirate diets were more destructive or accidentally sustaining. The truth, like most things aboard this creaky ship, lies in the middle. Pirates weren't health nuts, but they weren't fools either. They watched, listened, adapted. They learned which meals left their mouths aching and which left them singing. Tonight, you chew thoughtfully, watching stars ripple in the water below. Maybe, just maybe, the key to surviving the pirate life isn't a cutlass or a map, but something as humble as a softened biscuit and a bit of citrus on the tongue.
The stars above you blink softly, indifferent to human teeth or pirate troubles, and the sails flutter gently like sleepy sighs. The night hums with the distant rhythm of the sea, and you're nestled in the curve of the ship like it's a worn-out hammock. But even in this twilight calm, your thoughts drift, because earlier today, a crewmate
cracked a molar biting a rock-hard peach pit from a barrel labeled soft. He's been groaning all evening. And that brings us to tonight's peculiar topic: improvised dental procedures when everything went wrong. Because when a pirate's tooth decided to misbehave, and there wasn't a clove or a miswak twig or even a spare slug of rum to soothe it, well, things got creative. Let's start with the basics. If your tooth hurt, your first step was denial. It'll pass, you muttered. Maybe it's just a bit of salt stuck in the gum. Maybe chewing on the opposite side will help. Maybe if you pretend hard enough, it'll just go away. Spoiler, it doesn't. When the pain becomes impossible to ignore, the ship's unofficial medic, a carpenter, cook, or unlucky volunteer, gets involved. Lacking proper tools, they make do with what's on hand. A fishhook becomes a probe. A spoon handle becomes a lever. A square of linen serves as a gag. You lie back on a crate while the dentist peers into your mouth like it's a treasure chest hiding some curse. He prods gently at first, then harder. Then suddenly he says, "Don't move." An extraction might involve 3 men, one to hold you down, one to do the pulling, and one to sing loudly to distract everyone else. You're grateful you've avoided this fate. For now. One journal describes an extraction using pliers heated over a lantern. To sterilize, the writer notes, casually. Whether that's true sterilization or just a nice story for later, historians still debate. What's not debated? The results were often ugly. Sometimes extractions went wrong. Teeth broke mid-pull, roots were left behind, gums tore, bleeding followed. In those cases, the ship's cook might pack the wound with dried tea leaves or ash mixed with grease. "Stops the flow," they'd say. You'd nod, mainly because speaking was no longer an option. In rare, nightmare-inducing scenarios, pirates attempted to drill into a tooth. Not for fun, but to relieve pressure from an abscess. Using what? A ship's awl, a nail, anything sharp and narrow. The goal was to puncture, drain, and survive. It usually ended in fever, but hey, sometimes it worked. Historians still argue whether these crude root canals were inspired by local healers or sheer madness. There are stories, whispered late at night, about a pirate who once drilled with a tiny conch shell sharpened to a point. The tale gets murkier every time it's told. Sometimes he lives, sometimes he screams himself off the side of the ship. Either way, it's enough to keep you brushing twice a day. And then there were the herbal emergency kits. One captain insisted all crew carry pain paste, a blend of mashed garlic, vinegar, and crushed peppercorns. Rubbed on the gums, it burned like fire, but numbed like magic. Another crew chewed dried tobacco, spit it into a rag, and used the juice as a compress. Not exactly recommended, but desperate times, right? One legendary cook, nicknamed Gumsy Pete, carried a pouch of powdered oyster shell. Mixed with oil, it made a thick, chalky sludge. Slathered over an aching tooth, it formed a crude barrier against the air. Did it help? Pete had all his teeth. Coincidence? You decide. You even hear rumors of ships that carried tooth amulets, little carved trinkets made from shark bone or whale ivory, hung around the neck to ward off decay. Pirates, being pirates, half believed in curses, and the other half pretended not to, just in case. Still, not all improvised dentistry was barbaric. Some methods had surprising merit. Chewing on licorice root, for example, helped reduce inflammation. A poultice of crushed sage and honey had mild antiseptic effects. Even rinsing with seawater, though drying, helped flush bacteria. Accidental science, perhaps, but effective enough to pass down. Occasionally, when things got too grim, pirates sought help ashore. In back alleys of port cities, unlicensed dentists operated by candlelight. For a few coins or a bottle of rum, they'd extract a tooth with varying degrees of skill. One French pirate reportedly had a gold tooth set by a former silversmith. It gleamed like treasure when he smiled, until it fell out during a sneeze. As you lean against the rail tonight, you reflect on how close dental care came to being equal parts necessity and nightmare. For pirates, losing a tooth wasn't just pain, it could mean infection, fever, or death. But somehow, through luck, superstition, and sheer stubbornness, many got by. You pass the groaning sailor and offer him a sprig of mint and a sip of watered rum. He groans a thank you. You're not a dentist, but you're a pirate now. You help where you can. And quietly, you vow to chew slowly tomorrow. Very, very slowly.
The sea is calm tonight, humming a lullaby against the hull as the moonlight dances gently on the waves. You've begun to appreciate the rhythm of this life, its peculiar mix of chaos and calm, violence and dental hygiene. Because believe it or not, on some pirate ships, oral care evolved into a kind of shared responsibility, even a quiet ritual of camaraderie. It's not what you'd expect from a bunch of sea-hardened outlaws. These are the same people who once bet on who could catch a crab with their teeth. They both lost, mostly teeth. But when it came to the daily grind of pirate life, the small rituals made all the difference. And nothing was smaller or more quietly important than the collective effort to keep each other's mouths from falling apart. Each morning, like clockwork, someone starts chewing. Not food, twigs. You reach for your miswak stick, as do a few others. No one announces it. There's no dental drill sergeant barking orders. It's just what you do. Soften the twig, fray the end, gently scrub. Not for Instagram, not for applause, just for yourself and each other. Sometimes a crewmate helps another reach a sore spot, using a clean bit of cloth or a splinter of smooth bone. There's an unspoken rule. If a man's gums are too sore to chew, you help him. You offer him citrus, and keep an eye on the swelling, because next week it might be you with the swollen face and the searing jaw pain. This mutual maintenance isn't just about hygiene, it's survival. One infected molar can turn into a fevered mess, and a fevered mess makes for a useless sailor. And a useless sailor, well, he's shark food sooner or later. So you help. Everyone helps. And in so doing, pirate oral care becomes something softer than survival. It becomes culture. Take the tooth barrel, for example, a curious fixture on some ships, including yours. It's an old ale keg, emptied and tucked into the corner near the galley. Inside, a hodgepodge of cleaning implements, spare miswak sticks, dried sage bundles, soft cloths, the occasional mint leaf, and, oddly, seashells shaped into scoops. It's not labeled, no one explains it, but when a new recruit joins, someone usually points at the barrel, grunts, "Use it or lose 'em," and walks off. You smile when you see a greenhorn puzzling over it, poking through like it's cursed treasure. "Do I chew the mint or brush with it?" he asks. The answer is both. Mint goes in your mouth one way or another. The tooth barrel gets replenished on land. Everyone pitches in. One pirate swears by dried lavender, stuffing sotches and hanging them from the rigging to freshen the air and the gums. Another crafts bristle brushes from fish bone and stiff palm fibers. It's like a dental maker's fair, if your dentist also knew how to gut a man with a soup spoon. One guy, old Nicky, goes a step further. He keeps a journal of mouth remedies he's collected from ports around the world. Neem bark in Goa, clove oil in Zanzibar, crushed pearl powder from a trader in Macau. "Pain's the great unifier," he says.
Every culture's got a way to shut it up. His teeth are a mess, but his knowledge, impeccable. There's also the Tooth Song, a ridiculous little ditty half the crew sings during brushing time. No one knows where it came from, but the chorus goes, "Scrub the starboard, scrub the bow, scrub your molars anyhow. Gums of pink and teeth of white, scare the sea ghosts off tonight." It's absurd. It's catchy. You hum it under your breath while you work on your back molars. Historians still argue whether these rituals were common across pirate fleets or just isolated cases. Most primary records focus on battles, booty, and betrayals, not whether Black Bart rinsed with vinegar. But fragments remain: scribbled logs, letters from captured pirates, and the odd sketch of a shipboard toothbrush circle. And here's where things get really interesting. On some ships, the quartermaster enforced a kind of mouth inspection. Not daily, no one had that kind of time, but every few weeks, he'd line up the crew and peer inside their mouths with a lantern and a ladle. He'd say, "Clean teeth fight better. Rotten teeth mutiny." Was he joking? Partly, but only partly. Because here's the thing. Pirates weren't just bandits. They were floating democracies. The crew voted on leadership, divvied up spoils, and kept each other alive. Shared oral care wasn't a luxury. It was a logical extension of survival, teamwork, and, dare you say it, community. Tonight, after the wind dies down, you sit on deck beside another sailor, both of you silently working your twigs, watching the moonlight trace silver patterns on the water. He spits overboard. You do the same. There's no ceremony, just a nod, a quiet moment of human maintenance in a world full of noise. Who would have thought pirates, of all people, would teach you about dental solidarity? The wind has fallen nearly still, and the only sounds now are the gentle slap of waves against the hull and the occasional creak of timber. The night air is thick with salt and the faint tang of rope and oil, and the sky looks impossibly wide. Overhead, the stars have become familiar friends. Down here, on this aging sloop of roguish hygienists, you've become someone you wouldn't recognize a few weeks ago. Someone with reasonably clean teeth and a surprisingly sentimental attachment to the tooth barrel. And tonight, as the crew settles into their hammocks or leans drowsily over the rail, the conversation turns, as it sometimes does, to legacy. Specifically, how pirates are remembered and what gets left out. You hear one of the older crew grumble that no one in the history books talks about how hard it was to keep your mouth from rotting. They talk about swords and stolen treasure and executions, but not about daily mint leaf compresses or the desperate effort to keep your one good molar intact for chewing jerky. Romance the violence, forget the vinegar rinses, someone mutters. It gets a tired chuckle. Because here's the truth. Life on a pirate ship wasn't just blood and gold. It was also daily maintenance. It was stitching torn sails and mending frayed friendships. It was boiling drinking water, rationing dried peaches, and yes, trying to prevent your face from ballooning because a bit of molasses got stuck between your molars. It was the little acts. The sailor who shared his last stick of cinnamon bark with you because your tooth was throbbing. The cook who risked a few clothes from the galley stores just to make a mouth rinse that didn't taste like bilge water. The first mate who growled, "Brush before rum or you'll lose your tongue." These are the quiet, unrecorded glories of pirate life. Historians still argue whether these practices truly improved longevity or were just desperate acts of superstition. Some believe the attention to oral health was exaggerated by later accounts. Others insist that the pirates' surprisingly decent dental records when they can be found, suggest a deeper tradition than we've given credit for. Take the skeletal remains found near a Caribbean reef in the 1990s. No gold, no weapons, but nearly all teeth present, filed smooth and clean, some even polished with pumice. Whoever they were, they died poor, but minty fresh. Or the 18th century ship's log recovered in Tortuga, with a daily note in the margins. Twigs chewed, 19. Cloves spent, 3. No new complaints. Not quite swashbuckling stuff, but perhaps more intimate than any cannonball ever could be. You lean back, smile, gums a little tender but intact, and gaze up into the velvet dark. It occurs to you that these sailors, feared across the world, were also just men trying to avoid a jaw infection. And in a way, that makes them more real, more relatable. Not untouchable rogues, but anxious tooth rubbers just like you. Flawed, funny, human. The man next to you is already snoring, his breath heavy with clove and salt. Another hums the tooth song in his sleep. Below deck, someone mutters about needing a new stick. It's all oddly touching.
Tomorrow there'll be a squall. You'll have to reef the sails and maybe scrape barnacles off the hull. There may be a fight, or a sudden shift in winds, or some poor soul might break a molar on a walnut again. But for now you rest. Now you savor the strange warmth of shared routines and seaworthy smiles. Now the tooth barrel waits silently by the galley wall, half full of mint and hope. And maybe, just maybe, centuries from now, someone will whisper not about your stolen gold, but about how you helped preserve a tradition of pirate oral care. And that's a legacy. And now the ship drifts gently into the night, its sails loose, its timbers settled into sleep. The sea murmurs a low and rhythmic hush beneath you, soft as breath, steady as the stars. The deck is quiet now. The laughter and tooth talk have faded. The tooth barrel rests undisturbed, catching moonlight like a forgotten shrine. You lie back, the wooden boards oddly comfortable after all this time, and you feel the subtle roll of the ocean beneath you. It lulls you, coaxing you gently away from thought and into memory, from memory into dreams. The salt is still on your lips, but it's familiar now, like a part of you. Your gums ache just a little, a dull reminder of the day's small struggles, but even that feels distant, like something from a story someone once told you, softly in the dark. Above, the stars blur ever so slightly. The world quiets. You're safe here for now, among the pirates who cleaned their teeth with sticks and mint, who feared nothing but molar pain, and who, somehow, managed to carve out a little order, one brushing ritual at a time, in the wildest corners of the world. So let go. Let the sea rock you. Let your breath grow long and even. There's nothing more you need to do. Nowhere else to be. Just drift. Just rest. You've made it through another night among outlaws and oral care. Sweet dreams.